When I was growing up, my father would take me deep into eastern Kentucky every single summer for a week-long fishing trip. We always stayed at the exact same location, a dilapidated, primitive rental cabin positioned near a remote stretch of the river. The place was incredibly rustic. It featured an old wooden screen door that was so warped it never fully shut, and it was entirely surrounded by dense, second-growth forest that backed directly up against the sheer base of a massive mountain ridge. At night, the location became an absolute void of darkness. There wasn't a single neighbor within a mile radius, and you had to walk a considerable distance down to the main county road just to catch a single bar of cell signal. I have been entirely comfortable in that hollow my entire life. I had slept in that cabin since I was 7 years old, so I was thoroughly inoculated against the typical anxieties of the deep woods. I am 43 years old now. Last autumn, following a period of intense professional stress, I decided to rent that old cabin alone for a long weekend to clear my head. I had absolutely no agenda, just a desire to spend my days fly fishing the river and my evenings enjoying the total silence of the valley. What transpired on my second night there is the sole reason I am documenting this. I was sitting out on the covered wooden porch after dinner at roughly 9 o'clock. It was a remarkably clear night with an immense field of stars overhead. Suddenly, an overwhelming, primal sensation washed over me. It was that distinct, undeniable physical alarm that begins at the base of your spine and travels up to the back of your neck, causing every single hair on your body to stand perfectly on end. It is a biological threat response that occurs when your subconscious survival brain registers a lethal danger before your conscious mind has even identified it. I had only ever experienced that specific physical sensation once before in my life. Years prior, inside a dark city parking garage when an armed individual was actively stalking me from the shadows. That feeling is never wrong. I take it with absolute seriousness. I sat perfectly still in my porch chair, allowing my eyes to slowly adjust to the dark, and I intensely scanned the tree line at the back of the property, the exact zone where the cabin's small grass yard ended and the steep, forested slope of the ridge began. There was a shape standing there. It was a massive, vertical silhouette that was distinctly, impossibly darker than the surrounding blackness of the trees. It was positioned perfectly in a small gap between two large, ancient oak trees at the edge of the woods. It was exceptionally tall, completely motionless, and possessed a crude, terrifyingly hominid form. I sat frozen, staring intently at the silhouette for 2 full minutes. It did not shift its weight. It did not move an inch. A desperate wave of rationalization washed over me. I tried to convince myself that it was merely an old tree stump, an unusual shadow configuration, or a product of my own tired eyes compounding the paranoia. Unable to bear the uncertainty, I stepped inside the cabin, grabbed my high-powered tactical headlamp, walked back out onto the porch, and snapped the powerful beam of white light directly at the gap between the oaks. There was absolutely nothing there. The beam illuminated nothing but the gnarled bark of the oak trees, the low brush, and the empty dark of the forest floor behind them. Yet, the horrific feeling of being watched did not dissipate. In fact, it intensified. I have learned through hard experience never to argue with that instinct when it persists. I immediately walked back inside, slammed the heavy wooden door, and turned the deadbolt, an action that neither my father nor I had ever once done in our 30 years of staying at that property. I retreated to the bedroom and lay there with a weapon beside me until morning. The moment the sun illuminated the valley, I walked out to the edge of the yard to investigate the gap between the two oaks. The ground there was covered in a thick layer of damp leaf duff. Directly in the center of the gap, I found a massive physical depression in the soil. It wasn't a clean, anatomically detailed footprint with toes, but rather a severe, heavy compression of the earth. It was the rough shape and size of two immense, elongated feet standing perfectly side by side. The deep layer of dead leaves had been completely crushed down into the mud beneath by sheer, immense weight. The depression was so fresh that the surrounding leaves had not yet begun to spring back up to their natural volume. The moment I returned to an area with cell service, I placed a call to my father. He knows that specific hollow better than anyone alive. I walked him through the entire sequence of events: the alarm, the dark silhouette between the oaks, and the deep depression in the leaf duff. My father went completely silent on the other end of the line for a long, heavy moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was uncharacteristically quiet. "I always suspected something was living up on that high ridge," he murmured. I asked him precisely what he meant by that. He explained that a few years before he stopped making the trip down to Kentucky, he had spent a lot of time observing the local white-tailed deer populations from the cabin porch. He noticed that something was systematically tracking the herds through the property lines. It wasn't hunting them to kill. There were no carcasses left behind, but rather monitoring them, trailing their movements in the exact manner that a dominant, apex territorial animal keeps watch over the resources within its boundaries. My father told me he had initially attributed the behavior to a rogue mountain lion, an animal that officially does not exist in the state of Kentucky, despite endless reports from local woodsmen. But he admitted that whatever he had glimpsed moving through the high brush navigated the vertical slopes far differently than any feline he had ever encountered. Ultimately, he had made a conscious decision to simply stop thinking about it. He told me something that night that I have turned over in my mind ever since. If you've been going to that cabin for over 30 years and nothing bad has ever happened to you, then nothing bad is going to happen. That shape you saw probably thinks you look just as terrifying and unnatural to it as it looks to you. That mutual strangeness is perfectly fine, as long as nobody does anything stupid to break the peace. I have spent a long time contemplating the concept of mutual strangeness. I believe my father was entirely correct. Whatever occupies that hollow has shared the space with my family for 3 decades without a single act of violence. We are two entirely separate expressions of existence, crossing paths at the boundary line. I decided to stay at the cabin for my final scheduled night. I refused to let fear dictate my life. As darkness fell, I deliberately walked out onto the porch once more and sat in the chair. True to form, within an hour, the primal alarm flared up the back of my neck. I looked out into the darkness, and the massive, ink-black silhouette had returned, standing perfectly stationary in the gap between the two oaks. I did not turn on my flashlight this time. Instead, I looked directly toward the shape, and in a calm, clear voice, I spoke out loud into the dark. "I am leaving first thing in the morning. The cabin will be completely empty again, exactly how you like it. And I will return here in the spring." The moment the words left my mouth, the oppressive weight in the air lifted significantly. The primal panic faded into a manageable calm. I went inside, left the lights off, and slept peacefully through the night. I did indeed return to the cabin this past spring. I did not see the shape, and the clearing remained empty. I do not know what it is, but I will continue to return to that hollow for the rest of my days. We have an understanding.